I'd like to welcome you. My name is Margaret Davis. I'm president of Anne Arundel Women Giving Together. And welcome to summer in Anne Arundel County. While school's out, we know those committed to good and equitable education aren't on break. We are grateful for today's program and for these hardworking and extremely impactful educational professionals locally and nationally who've joined us. I hope you don't mind if I take a brief personal moment and introduce you to my granddaughter, my namesake, Maggie. Maggie comes from a long line of educators and those who work for equitable, anti-racist education, from her great-great-grandmother to her mother. I'm glad she's joining us today. I also want to briefly share why Anne Arundel Women Giving Together is hosting this education program. Anne Arundel Women Giving Together, better known in our community as AAWGT, and its more than 350 members, is dedicated to improving the quality of life for women and families in Anne Arundel County through now up to about $2 million of grant making, our vast organizational partnerships, and collective philanthropy in the community with each other. Our topic tonight, equitable, anti-racist schools, is essential to the quality of life in all communities. As an organization with our board committees and growing membership, AAWGT embraces a culture and practices diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, and belonging. We believe that when our membership, our leadership, and community participation reflects DEI principles, we are better positioned to achieve our critical community mission. Race is an emotional topic. It should be. It's personal. It's also an integral and valuable part of our American history. By joining us tonight, I know you likely also believe that such conversations can bring us together to create new bridges to a stronger, more equitable, and inclusive future. Ibram Kendi helped me better understand in the most hopeful of ways what the true opposite of being a racist really is. This incredible historian, university professor, and National Book Award author puts it clearly. He says, the opposite of racist isn't not racist. The opposite of racist is anti-racist. The difference is either we allow racial inequities to persevere, or we confront racial inequities and we work to fix them. That's anti-racist. I want to work with you together on behalf of Anne Arundel County as we all move forward. Now I'd like to introduce you to Kathleen Kriza, an inspiring educator and advocate, and fortunately our chair of the Anne Arundel Women Giving Together Education Committee. Thank you to you and your committee, Kathleen, for giving of yourselves and bringing this program to the community this evening. Kathleen.
Thank you, Margaret, and good evening, everyone. I'm so excited to hear tonight's discussion. We've been planning this for a long time, and it's finally here. So Anne Arundel Women Giving Together created the Education Committee programs to provide a window into our community to help membership and guests become aware of the challenges that exist in our county, and to use that knowledge to formulate ways we can support and help nonprofits who work on the ground to make things happen. With that in mind, our passionate and committed panelists and moderator will bring their unique perspectives on what is happening in schools related to racial inequities. They will also offer suggestions for what we can do at the grassroots level to help make a difference for students from marginalized cultures. It is an honor to get to introduce them to you. They have accomplished so much more than I can share with you at this time, but we will put links to their websites in our resources so that you'll be able to access them later. First, let me introduce Dr. Donna Y. Ford. Okay. Hi, Donna. Donna is a distinguished professor of education and human ecology at Ohio State University, the Ohio State University, and a faculty affiliate at the Center for the Latin American Studies and the Kirwan Institute. She's reached educators around the world by publishing over 300 scholarly articles and making over 2,000 presentations. Dr. Ford is a rock star in educational psychology, especially in the field of minority students and gifted education. We thank her for her decades of tireless dedication to this and other equity causes. Thank you for being here with us, Donna. Next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Gregory C. Hutchings, Jr. Dr. Hutchings is the founder and the CEO of Revolutionary Ed, LLC, and he's an assistant professor and program coordinator at Howard University School of Education. He is an educational leader, anti-racist racism activist, and a published author who unapologetically advocates for Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and for racial equity in education. Dr. Hutchings has made an impact on school districts by supporting school leaders in getting into good trouble in their schools. Dr. Hutchings, John Lewis would be proud of you for all that you've done. And finally, I'd like to introduce Carlisa R. Finning. Hi, Carlisa. Nice to see you. And our discussion tonight is going to be expertly facilitated by educator and family support advocate Carlisa R. Finney. She is the interim director of Early Head Start at Anne Arundel Community Action Agency. Carlisa has made a lasting impact on the causes of racial equity in Anne Arundel County and in the school system. And Carlisa believes that when it comes to caring about your community, no one can do everything, but everyone can do something. And she's done a lot of somethings, that's for sure. So I can't wait to hear from them. But before we begin, I have a couple of housekeeping items, of course. Now, tonight's event is being recorded to preserve the valuable insights that are shared by our panelists and participants. The recording will be accessible on the givingtogether.org website. And please, 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 we ask you to share with others so that we can get this information to everyone. Finally, our panelists are eagerly awaiting questions from you, and those will be answered in the final 15 minutes of our conversation. So please feel free to submit them in the Q&A box that you'll see on your screen. And I will now turn over this evening's program to our wonderful moderator, Carlisa Finney.
So good evening to everyone. Thank you all for participating in this very exciting topic for me and for the women giving together in Anne Arundel County. They are the fastest growing nonprofit interested in supporting nonprofits in our community that we've had in a long time. And I am honored to be here and honored to have been asked to moderate this program today. We have two, as you have heard, not only experts, but leaders in the field of diversity, equity, inclusion, and systematic anti-racism. They have years of experience dismantling the systems and in our schools across America. I want to get us right to the questions because we have lots of things that we want to talk about, that we want to hear about. And so the first question I'd like to ask is, can you share, both of you, we can start with Dr. Ford, if you will, share a story from your background that led you to your commitment to build anti-racist schools.
Well, thank you. And I'm really pleased to be here and appreciate those who are in attendance. So let me say I have a lot of stories, but I will just share one. When I was 16 years of age, I was what is called an ABC student, a better chance student. And I had an opportunity to go to a private high school of my choice in the United States. And I chose one that was near where I lived in Cleveland. And of all of my educational experiences from preschool to PhD, preschool to PhD, this was the worst educational experience of my life. I was humiliated every day. I was accused of cheating almost every day. I was accused of stealing almost every day. I was strip searched when they couldn't find, what was stolen. All right. It was horrific. Donna, who helped you with this? Oh, did you use Cliff Notes? And I would say, I don't know anybody named Cliff. And then I would get in trouble for being sarcastic. This is what I'm calling a trigger alert. This was so bad. And I'm a very strong person. Trigger alert that I became suicidal. I planned my suicide because I didn't think that I could ever get out of that school and be successful. I started believing that I was no longer smart, that I was ashamed of being Black, I was ashamed of being poor, and I can go on and on and on and on. And to end, I never wanted any student to ever experience that again. That was 1970s, and you know damn what? That BS is still happening today.
You're absolutely right. How powerful, how emotional. And I'm sure everyone in the audience feels your anxiety and how you can see it in your face still today, how traumatizing that was. Greg, tell us what got you into this field.
Yes, and for me, I was 15 years old, and I was at T.C. Williams High School. People have seen the movie Remember the Titans with Denzel Washington, Coach Boone, who was my teacher when I was in high school. And I was at a program where, in order to be in honors classes, you had to meet certain standards. I did not meet those standards because I didn't do well on tests. And I used to walk down the hall past this classroom and saw kids engaged, and I heard laughter and fun happening. And my class was always boring, where the teacher was reading a newspaper literally in the classroom. So I went to my counselor to say, hey, I want to be in that honors class. And he told me I did not meet the standards, and no, I cannot be in that class. Well, 15-year-old me, even then, I'm still this way now, my mom would tell you. I said, well, you tell me no, I'm gonna find a way to say yes. And I did a petition at my high school, and I went to Mr. Porter, our principal, and said, your counselor doesn't believe in me, but your students do, and I want to sign up for honors. And he walked me down and put me into the honors class. Now I got a C in the honors class, but I passed, and I was in honors for the rest of my time, and eventually got a scholarship to go to college. But that was when I realized my voice was power. At 15 years old, it changed the entire trajectory of my life. And that's when I knew I was going to be, I didn't know it was called anti-racism then, but I knew that I was going to be an advocate and somebody who will be able to advocate on behalf of others as well as myself.
Thank you too, Greg, for your story. What I hear with both of you is the belief that people, adults, teachers, administrators have in our children. And one of the things that I know you all will bring out in your work is that if all of our educators believe that all children can succeed, no exceptions, you would not have had the trauma that you expressed and shared with us. Unfortunately, what you have shared is also what, as Donna said, many, many students are still experiencing today. And we are listening to you now to help us to understand what is an anti-racist school and how is it that that concept connects with equity in education. Why does it matter? Greg, how about if you start?
Well, I mean, for me, when I think about anti-racism in schools, just in general, I always think of racial equity, meaning that my definition is that, race no longer defines the outcomes of students. We find now constantly disparities that are not because students are Black. The disparities are because of the people who are in those rooms and in those classrooms and the systems and the policies and the practices that are impacting them, not the student. And we have spent so much time focused on, well, this is a Black child. And if that Black child happens to come from a low income community or happens to come from a household where there's just one parent or a parent that may not have gone to college, then now that child has been labeled to not be able to achieve, right? And that happens, I think, constantly. So anti-racism in schools is ensuring that regardless of what a child's circumstance is, and regardless of what race they are, that we meet them where they are and provide them exactly what they need in order to attain the goals that they have set for themselves, not the goals that we continuously set for all people.
So why does that matter?
You know, it matters because I feel that if we continue, to define kind of like what Black students can do, or what BIPOC students can do, we are lowering the bar, right? And I think that sometimes we get into these spaces in our schools across America where we want to have this cookie cutter approach. Every child is different. There are cultural differences that we need to acknowledge. There is historical trauma that we need to acknowledge. We talk about adverse childhood experiences all the time. I'm always surprised that racism is not an adverse childhood experience, right? Because students who experience racism, some of the same behaviors that manifest from a child that was physically abused or mentally abused or sexually abused, or has a parent who is incarcerated, some of those same behaviors are exhibited in the classroom. And we're not defining this as a childhood, an adverse childhood, experience. So it's essential in order for our young people to be able to prosper and for this narrative to change in America.
Thank you for that, Dr. Ford.
I was trying to,
What is
what was chiming in?
anti-racist? I'm sorry, what did I say?
No, I was saying I could see her getting off mute. I'm like, come on, I'm ready to hear from Dr. Ford.
Oh, absolutely. We want to hear from you, Dr. Ford. Everyone's waiting with bated breath. What is an anti-racist school? And
Well,
how does that concept connect with equity in education?
Well, everything that Greg said, and I do mean everything. The only thing I want to say is it's not just historical trauma, it's contemporary trauma as
Yes.
well. It's current trauma as well. And we really need to dig into the work of William Smith on racial battle fatigue. Okay. And that is discussed in the school context. So, equity is doing doing things different because children are different, and there's no need to pretend like there are no differences, especially through a cultural lens. We're not talking about anything about genetics. We're talking about, environmental and cultural. And to put a name on what Greg was saying, we're talking about deficit thinking. And so my quote is, the less we know about others, the more we make up. The less you know about Black children, the more you make up. So to be anti-racist, you need to learn more about us, which I call dynamic thinking. The more you know about us, the less you make up. So an anti-racist school for me is indeed equitable. And by the way, we do need to talk about equity because this is the 70th anniversary of Brown versus the Board of Education. And we still have damn segregated schools, all right? Segregated classrooms. And this is the 70th anniversary of the civil rights of 1964. And we still are not there. So for me, quickly, 5 components. One is, going back on what you said, Greg, putting students at the center of what we're doing. So you cannot be colorblind, which I call culture blind, and you cannot be culturally assaultive.
That's
you cannot be, okay? And again, you cannot be culture blind. You must examine your philosophy about working with us. Is it dynamic thinking? Is it deficit thinking? Deficit thinking is racist thinking. All right. What about the learning environment? Do you make us feel a sense of belonging and welcome and appreciated and understood and valued? Do you want us in your classroom? Because if you don't have to say it. We sure as hell know that you don't. Your actions speak louder than your words. We also have to look at curriculum. Is it culturally assaultive? For example, last November, I think it was, a teacher had I'll call it not audacity, but the damn caudacity to, with 2-year-old babies, do a unit or let's say a lesson on slavery, and had a little 2-year-old white child fingerprint and handcuff a 2-year-old Black child. Okay, don't tell me that how in the hell did you come up with some kind of idea like that? You've got to be insane. You must be racist to do something like that. So the curriculum, and we need more multicultural books so our children can see themselves reflected and affirmed in what they read, and reading is the foundation of everything. We need to look at instruction. All right, are your how you teach, your pedagogy, is it culturally responsive? Do you take into consideration how children of color like to learn? And there is research on how we do. And finally, these damn tests, they are racist, they are anti-Black, they're anti-brown, etc. And the American Psychological Association in 21 finally issued an apology to Blacks and other minoritized people for the legacy of racist tests. They finally admitted that even to this day, these measures are racist. These tests are racist. So philosophy, learning environment, curriculum, instruction, and assessment. There's more that I want to, let me just say one more thing. We've got to have educators who are not just, first of all, we need more people who look like us.
Yes.
Okay. And I don't mean like Clarence Thomas. I'm talking about authentically Black people.
That's right.
Authentically minoritized people. We need more of us in these schools. But with our white counterparts, we need you to not just be, it's a new body of work out there, not just allies, not just co-conspirators, but we need, I mean, not just allies and not just accomplices. We need you to be co-conspirators and give up some of your white privilege. And why don't you make sacrifices to make sure that marginalized populations, minoritized populations are successful. Okay, that's so right. It takes educators to make this happen. We have these systems, but systems are made up of people, and the people make the difference.
Amen.
Wow. Wow. How powerful.
Thank
and
you.
I can already tell you the cringing that must be being felt by just listening to some of where the blame lies. It's everywhere. It's all of us. It's the systems. It's the curriculum. It's the words. And you know already how difficult it is, as our president said in the introduction, that speaking about race is very uncomfortable. And you all are emoting the emotions that are turned inside out. One, to talk about your trauma, and then to turn that energy into positive ways to talk about such difficult terminologies, where we need to make changes. And I thank you for that power.
Lisa, let me say this. Sorry to interrupt.
No, please.
So, it bothers me when people say, talking about racism is very uncomfortable. Well, guess what? Being a victim of damn racism is even more uncomfortable.
Yes.
That's right.
Okay.
Yes.
And we are talking about children.
Yeah.
All right. We're not talking about college. We're not talking about adults. We are talking about children. So if it's difficult for you to talk about it, just imagine how difficult it is for us to experience. And I believe in what's called the pedagogy of discomfort. No pain, no gain. So I am not going to make anybody comfortable with talking about racism, because it should be uncomfortable, and then it should move you out of this uncomfortable zone into comfortable, because you are working with the majority of your children in these United States are non-white. When are you going to get with the program, right? Stop pretending like we don't exist. The majority of children in our public schools are non-white.
So just to piggyback off of that statistic, there are many people who are for choice and for vouchers and what we know is that more than 88% of the African-American children, Black children, children of color, Hispanic children go to public schools. They don't have choice. We know too many examples where the children are living right next door to a school of choice and they can't go there. So I think, thank you for telling us to open our eyes to see not only what's going on, but to see our children, and we can see it in you. So as we talk about,
I just want to say this
yes,
really quickly,
please,
just what
please.
Dr. Ford was saying, as you were talking about, not kind of caring whether somebody's uncomfortable, right? The bigger thing is, who has the right to be comfortable in the first place? No one has a God-given right to be comfortable. And as a Black man in America, every single day, I'm in an uncomfortable situation. And if I had the ability or even the option to be able to say, I'm going to choose not to talk about this, or I'm going to choose to separate myself from this, I'm going to choose not to feel this emotion, I would not be able to live in America. Right. And it's that real. I don't get to change the color of my skin or what perceptions come, the moment I walk into a room, right? I don't get to change that. So no one has the right to be comfortable is all I just wanted to say.
But what you all are doing
That's
is
right.
you are helping people to see, to hear, and you are looking at schools in all of those elements that you described, the systems, the curriculum. Let us hear from you what is working in some of the schools and districts that are becoming more anti-racist, that are becoming more equitable. Because as difficult as you have depicted this picture, we know that there are some successes and there are some people who are committed to making sure that change happens.
That's right. And there are many school systems I know that I'm seeing across the nation that I'm actually working with. And what I've done, and this, you can find this actually in my book, Getting Into Good Trouble. There are 6 specific pillars that I look at that I know are working to be anti-racist as a school or a school system. Number 1 is knowing your history. Right? Because a lot of times folks will jump to or try to jump to solutions on particular situations, and not knowing that history does not allow you to even change the narrative. If we look at what's happening in America today, this is mirroring what was happening in the 60s in America right now, like in 2024. This is why we had a civil rights movement, for some of the stuff that's happening right now. Right now, I wasn't a part of the civil rights movement because I wasn't born till 77, but I read the history to learn, about that. And you have to be able to unpack some of those cultural norms that have been established that are sometimes false in your community. Number 2 is committing to racial equity. School systems that are making a commitment to racial equity, not just equity, but racial equity, because when you add race to anything, it exacerbates that disparity. Race in special ed, race in LGBTQ, race in gifted, race into anything will exacerbate your data. Number 3 is, how do we eliminate de facto segregation in our schools, right? And I'm an advocate for, students needing gifted services, students needing special education services. How they are delivered is where I question, right? And sometimes we monopolize these programs and we specialize and make it so that it becomes what I call a form of de facto segregation, where certain people get to be in there and others cannot. And once you're in one path, you never can get out of it. Special ed is not meant for you to be in there from kindergarten to 12th grade, but we've set it up that way. Number 4 is, how do we make sure that we differentiate between policing and discipline? Time and time again, I'm seeing in schools, we have these 0 tolerance policies. We have students who are sending faculty members and teachers that are sending students to the office, consistently, and they're being suspended and expelled from our schools. We have kids who walk down the halls with their hands behind their backs, looking on the floor, and we're celebrating that kind of stuff because we want to have structure and order, and we're setting them up to go to prison. We're creating our schools to have a culture like a prison, right? Which that's a whole nother conversation about incarceration. The 5th area, and I just got 2 more. The 5th is around making sure you have both strategic planning and strategic thinking, right? Your strategic plan is going to guide what you are striving to do as a school system, right? It's going to be your roadmap to your success. Strategic thinking is how you're going to navigate to attain those specific goals. And let me give you an example. When I was superintendent in Alexandria City Public Schools, I had a white audience sometimes that I had to, present data and have conversations with. I knew just my mere presence of standing in front of that group, sometimes the words that I say never gets to their ears because they made judgments the moment I stepped out. So a strategic thinker is going to take my chief academic officer, my chief accountability officer, who happened to be a white male, and I gave him my notes on what we believe in ACPS, and I'm going to sit on the front row, and you're going to say it to these white folks. And he gets a standing ovation. Now we got everybody jumping on board. We love equity. I'm like, that's the strategic thinker right there. Because if I said it, they would have been trying to fire me and get me out of the community. You get the white man to say it and they're loving it. What we need to do. And hey, that's my hook. That's a strategic thinker. And then the final thing is being a courageous and bold leader. Courageous and bold leadership is so essential in being anti-racist. And it's even more challenging if you are a person of color, because I don't know if you've read the book Black Fatigue by Mary Frances Winters, but it really gave me some language to what I have been experiencing as a Black leader my entire career, right? And that is, I'm fatigued because I'm also a victim. And I'm a victim having to continuously deal with triggers and repeat my trauma, but then also be an advocate and have the energy to continue to advocate, right? And that takes courageous and bold leadership, which I think there are 3 characteristics, VIP: vision, integrity, and passion, in order to do that.
So Donna, just before you answer some of what is working, I just want to acknowledge that rather than uncomfortable, we're really talking about it's being emotional because
Yes.
it's personal. And I want to say that I just want to make sure that I'm clear, because Margaret made that point and we see the emotion in it. What I think is my experience is that as emotional as it is, as traumatic as it is, to get people to move in the direction that you have pointed out, Greg, and that I know that Don is also working strategically with schools, that we see how we can make sure that we get the information out to the people who can influence what we're doing. And so, Donna, as you talk about what is working in schools, help us to understand what you see, what it takes to get this work done, and what kind of leadership is it going to take to ensure that we stay the course, so we can address the emotion and the trauma that you all have really so eloquently expressed.
Well, Greg, your pillars are just phenomenal, and they are certainly on point. In addition to that, or just also reinforcing what you said, is what we do to make a difference and have impact to achieve equity is to also be data driven. So, you mentioned gifted and talented education, you mentioned special education, there's also discipline. I mean, I looked at OCR's website, Office for Civil Rights Data Collection website. It's at ocrdata.ed.gov. And the county's data on gifted and talented, advanced placement, special education, and discipline was appalling, very troubling, very disturbing. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So I'm glad you're having this this platform. We've got to address the special education overrepresentation, the high incidence areas. So for example, when it comes to like visual impairment or hearing impairment, there's not overrepresentation. a physical disability. There's no overrepresentation. It's where there's more subjectivity and where there's more tests. So it's like learning disabilities, emotional and behavioral disorders, and and more. All right. So high incidence areas is what we need to really interrogate and address. And I see schools that are being equitable and anti-racist, making sure that they address that, all right, in terms of special education. Then in terms of gifted education and advanced placement is not for gifted students. It's for any student who wants to take college prep classes. All right, let's be clear. So, but both of them are always Black students more than any other group are underrepresented in those two. I'm just gonna call them tracks for lack of a better word. So, and that's the same case in this county. So we've got to desegregate. We've got to recruit and retain more students of color, especially Black students in those programs. And that means we've got to not be fearful of the status quo. So I see successful districts, effective districts, equitable districts, anti-racist districts being willing to take on the status quo. These privileged families who want basically a private school within a damn public school. We've got to address discipline, the adultification of our Black boys. I mean, the Office of Civil Rights data and others indicate that Black boys, preschoolers just out of doggone diapers, are about 19% of our preschoolers. However, they're over 50% of children suspended. All right, suspended. We don't need to talk about expelled. And so you cannot say that, racism doesn't exist. So we look at that data and we do something about it. We got to look at why students are being referred for suspension, why they've been referred for special education, why they're not being referred for advanced placement and gifted and talented education. Years ago, I was fascinated when I was happy when I was on committees that were hiring P to 12 teachers. And I always ask questions related to like racism. So like I would ask the questions, if you have a significant number of Black students in your class who are not doing well, what is your explanation? And their answer would tell me whether I wanted them to be hired or not, that one question. So there are schools who are interviewing teachers with a focus on racism and discrimination. That is essential. I mean, you got to go ahead early on and prevent these teachers from working with our children, okay? Not just students, but our children. And then I already said this, and I can't say it enough, we've got to have representation, more minoritized, not just teachers, but also school counselors, school psychologists, and principals, superintendents, leaders. So that just goes back to adding on to or emphasizing in a different way what Greg has already said.
Nice.
Schools that are doing this are making a difference, and we need more who are doing this.
And amen. And when you say doing this, what I heard from you both is that it is intentional. It is researched. Everything that you are saying, everything that you are presenting to us in a very emotional and personal way is actually researched. And I know that there are people in the audience who want to know, where do I find this information? Where do I find the research? Where do I find the solutions? Where do I find how to have the kinds of courageous conversations where we allow and we can sit with the trauma that is being expressed when you have a diverse population at the table with the strategic planning and the strategic thinking, because this emotion that you are expressing is going to come out at the planning table. And people have to allow, without taking it personal, the emotion that you're expressing to get to the strategy. So I want to just share, because the question that I have next is, what are some of the current concerns you have in seeing schools like Anne Arundel County Public Schools? And I just want to give a little background to the people in the audience that in 2004, about 20 parents came together because they were very upset with the data and the long-standing, persistent, disparate outcomes for African American children. And they submitted a complaint to the Office of Civil Rights. And Dr. Ford, you talked about looking at the current data, not just to rely on the local data, the state data, but look at the national data, because all the schools have to submit that information for that national picture. And an agreement was mediated by the Justice Department to develop and implement a plan. And that plan included focusing on academic achievement, those things that you talked about today, rigor and assessments and special education, disproportionality, on discipline. And that's one of the hardest nuts to crack, as we know, and engaging the community. Just one statistic from a report that was given to the county council in 2013, almost 20 years ago, Anne Arundel County was forced to embark upon a systemic approach to anti-racism and eliminating these disparities. When the policy, Greg, as you just alluded to, was changed in discipline, in expulsion, Anne Arundel County had more than 10 or 12 different reasons for students to be expelled. That was not aligned with the state's 4 or 5 or 6 items that would expel a student. And when the policy was changed to align with the state's number of expellable offenses, Anne Arundel County's data went from 138 African American students being suspended in 2004, 2005 to 3 in 2013. So even changing policies, structures can help us to move towards anti-racist, because you have those conversations in order to have that data. So we could talk more about the history. Again, as Dr. Hudson says, you've got to know your history in your community. You've got to know your history in the country. You've got to know how we got here, because we cannot come up with viable solutions until we know how it is we got here. And we have to have patience with one another as we have these emotional conversations. So what are some of your concerns in seeing schools related to anti-racist actions?
Well, you know,
we can keep this one succinct so that I can ask the last question, which I think is going to help the audience, especially what can we do about this?
well, I just have to say, before I answer, or we answer that question, and I'll let you go first, Greg. You know, Carlisa, you are using a word, and I like this, you know, emotional. And too often, scholars who are emotional are not perceived to be scholars, because you're supposed to be so impartial and not display emotion. I am angry, and I'm not going to apologize for being angry. I mean, I'm livid. All right. So, and my thing is, if you're not angry about what's going on, something's wrong with you. Something is wrong if you are not angry, and angry can compel you to action. So be emotional, be angry. This is not just professional, this is personal. So I just want to you know, throw that in there. Okay, we
Absolutely.
are emotional, and it's
Absolutely.
legitimate.
It's legit. I'm right with you. So your concerns, that's one, that we understand the emotion of this because it's long-standing, and then that we get into some strategic. Go ahead.
I think that, you know, Dr. Ford, she hit the nail on the head in regards to the emotional piece. I also think that some of the concerns is how America is really trying to not embrace anti-racism. We are more willing to embrace anti-Blackness than anti-racist. And that to me is very concerning. I mean, you have teachers and educators across this country right now who are losing jobs for using words like equity or racism or microaggressions. I've even been asked to change my language. And my business has only been in existence for 2 years. And initially I contemplated and I was like, oh, heck no, I'm not changing. If I don't call it what it is, 50 years from now, when that next generation is trying to figure out what we did do and we never called it what it was, they're going to say, well, we don't know what happened. Like, we got to say it. We have equity issues. We have racist practices. We need to abolish them. Like, so we have to use that kind of language. But the concern is that America is not open and willing. Many people in America are not open and willing to embrace that. Everybody's so putting so much effort into trying to erase it versus kind of embrace it and really tackle it.
So Dr. Ford says the more things change, the more things stay the same. We don't want things to stay the same. We don't want to be back here moderating when we're old and gray and having this conversation again. We want to tackle it the way it is. And so the Anne Arundel Women Giving Together invest in our community, in our nonprofits who are trying to align with school systems, support children in the community, support communities, help to build the capacity of grassroots organizations to support young people. They use their time and their finances to educate. This is one of their sessions, to educate the community, the issues, the problems, and how we can come together in solutions. And they inspire by encouraging their members to get involved individually and do the kinds of things they can do as a group to address these issues. You know a little bit about some of their anti-racist work, and just to have the courage to offer this presentation today, this meeting today, is something that inspires me for sure. And I know that it's inspired you all when you were talking about being in this on this panel. So the final question is, what are some of the things that nonprofits, and especially Anne Arundel Women Giving Together, can do in our community to support the anti-racism in our schools?
Well, I think there are a number of things, but to be mindful of time, I definitely want to say what we're doing right now in professional development is crucial. Too often we don't get what we need in higher education, and so we have to make up for that in professional development. And so it must be really bold and direct topics like what we're addressing today. I mean, right before this class, right before this presentation, this panel, I was teaching a class, and it's called Anti-Racist Culturally Responsive Education, right before this, today. Okay, so I'm just, putting it out there. So higher education needs to do it. They're not doing it enough, maybe. So we need to have this professional development. And the other one is, we can't do this alone. We really need to immerse ourselves in the communities of minoritized populations. So build partnerships and relationships with them to empower and enlighten our families and community agencies so that they can also work with us to build equitable, culturally responsive, anti-racist schools. And when I say communities, I'm not just talking about educational communities. We need wraparound services. We need to, collaborate with places of worship, because many times they have educational programs.
I got your list. I think we're gonna add to that when we have this conversation with the Women Giving Together. Greg, could you give us just some points in the last 2 minutes that we have before we go to our question and answer from our office?
Yeah, and I would say the advocacy. Yeah, I would say the advocacy is a very important piece. And then also just making sure that there's funding to provide this professional learning that's needed, right? A lot of times school systems are having challenges to have some of the fundings. Many schools were using ESSER funds, which unfortunately those ESSER funds are now running out. I think it's important for philanthropists to come in to provide funding to train all staff, whether it is about anti-racism or any type of equity training. So I think that's something that you all could definitely do, in addition to, what Dr. Ford mentioned.
This is a topic that takes years. You all have been doing this, each of you, for many years, all of us. And the work continues. And I'm so thankful that we have allies and co-conspirators in the audience who want to work in our county, in our community, to ensure that our school is anti-racist and that we have the backing of our community here today. I cannot thank you two enough for exciting us, inspiring us, and maybe inciting us. I'm not sure, but I know that we're not going to stop what we've been doing, and we would love to find a way to invite you back, maybe for some of that professional development to help us to move forward in this work in Anne Arundel County. Are there any of our colleagues who are on the line who want to take us to the next step? Because we could go on and on and on.
This is Karen Smith, and I'm fielding some of the questions from the audience. One of the questions has to do with Anne Arundel County Schools do have a student equity advisory team, and they have some coursework called Let's Talk Justice that has been created as a forum to discuss racism and social justice. Can you talk for just a minute about the importance of student voice in the work that you are doing and in the efforts to create anti-racist schools?
I think oh, sorry. Go ahead, Dr. Ford.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm sorry. Equity is not just about, educators. It is also about, students being able to have enough information and resources, a sense of empowerment to also address any barriers that they may face. So I absolutely love when we empower students. So that sounds wonderful.
Yeah, and I was going to say that, students being a part of this work is probably the most important component, because I had a student recently tell me, he said, Dr. Hutchings, we're not in your world, you're in our world. And I was like, wow, that is so true. All they know, they've already had a Black president of the United States. They know about ChatGPT. They only know technology. I had to learn all these things, right? So this is their world, and we don't give them enough credit. And also, I think we don't give them enough space to be able to guide us through this. We're always trying to tell them from our walk of life, which has nothing to do with what today is like. It's totally different.
As we know, the civil rights movement was led by our children.
That's right. I
Guidance
remind
of
people about that all
adults
the time.
listened to them and allowed them. Do you have another question from the audience?
There was just a question that came in, and it said, speaking from a teacher lens, how can we challenge the racist structures that are preventing equitable schools from being established when these systems are designed to be inequitable? Ooh, that's a question that we could talk for hours about that one. But where do you begin to change systems that have been designed as they are?
Well, unfortunately, it's going to take a long time before we do see, such changes. So I think you just need to operate in your sphere of influence. When you, so to speak, close your door, that is where you can do whatever you think is necessary to, to be equitable and anti-racist. And
Gloria Ladson Billings.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And things like learn about how to create curriculum that's multicultural. You must learn about the 4 levels of infusing multicultural content into the curriculum by James Banks. James Banks is 4 levels. You must, really emphasize, critical thinking, because our students need rigor, not rigor mortis. All right. You need to learn about theories of prejudice so that you are not complicit. So, learn about Gordon Allport's 5 degrees of prejudice. Learn about Robert Merton's model of prejudice and discrimination. Learn about, microaggressions. So you've got to also educate yourself when others are not doing enough for you, so that you can have so much information that you can be a co-conspirator. You can be a social justice let me just say advocate for right now. So, I can't end racism, but I know what I can do when I'm in my classes with my university students. And that is to give them enough information so that they become anti-racist and equitable, and, not be part of the problem, but be part of the solution.
Dr.
And
Hush, the last
yeah, I
word
was
on
going to
this.
mention one quick thing. It was in regards to policy drives practice. So it is very important that there is an audit of policies in school systems to make sure that they are equitable, so that they can be updated and revised, because that will drive different practices, which will give you different outcomes. And it is a very tedious process, but it is possible because that policy will drive the practice of schools. And no matter who's in their roles, whether it's a new superintendent or new board members or new teachers or new principals, because that policy is in place, it can change the culture of those environments. And then finally, folks who are not on board, they need to just go. I'm tired of hearing people who are, complaining about being educators and being in schools. I always say, well, you know what? The door is right there. So can you please step out of it so we can get somebody else in here? Because we don't need folks in education in this space complaining about how hard and difficult and horrible it is. Right now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't talk about how difficult and horrible the environment might be, but not like, I don't want to work here mentality. If you don't want to work here, let's get people who do.
That's
so
right.
we can stop being
We
stuck.
only want people here who want to be here. And I can say from my experience that you can't do any of that policy work, can't do any of that current change work until you do what Dr. Ford said, which is educate yourself. There's so many resources. That's what Anne Arundel County Public Schools did. Our leadership was involved with lots of professional development before we ever even did an audit, looking at our data, looking at our policies. So everyone has to educate themselves. We could have this conversation again tomorrow, the next day. We appreciate you. We have our vice president, from
Arlisa, I'm going to interrupt you for one
Okay,
quick second,
absolutely.
just to let the audience know there have been so many questions that we haven't been able to get to. But one of the ones that continues to repeat is, how can we get a list of all the resources, the wonderful books, the resources that you three have talked about? And let me just say to the audience, we will be gathering these resources and putting them on the Giving Circle website, so that
I
you
am
will
happy to
able
be the conduit, if you would like, to collect those resources. And I would be able to cross-reference them with those that I have so that we can give you a list that's not duplicative. And I think that we want to emphasize not getting overwhelmed, because this is such an important topic to so many today, that there's lots of research out there. So I'm happy to work with Kathleen to come up with a resource list for the audience to be able to pass this on to others.
Thank you. And
Oh,
also, I know the last chapter of my book has all of the resources you need to apply.
there
all
you
the
go. There you go.
They're
And
resources that have been vetted and that are actionable and that you can actually use. I believe in using other people's stuff. That's what we do as educators. We
that's
lift
what we
up those who are in that research space. So my entire chapter is devoted to those resources.
And it very well may be that there's some way that we can use those questions to either respond to them or to create some other educational sessions. And I'm happy to help.
Yeah, and a toolkit would be wonderful.
Yes. Margaret, Margaret Davis, are you about ready to close us out?
Yes, ma'am. I am. We will be putting this recording, a summary of this amazing time together and a list of resources on the Giving Together website. What an incredibly thought-provoking and valuable conversation we had this evening. On behalf of AAWG, I just want to say we are honored to be allies and your co-conspirators in the work ahead. Let's continue advancing the civil rights journey for women and families in Anne Arundel County. Really, truly, we know together we can drive more meaningful change and make a lasting impact. Thank you, Dr. Hutchings. Thank you, Dr. Ford, our incredible moderator. Wow, I've never seen such elegant tap dancing and content on a Zoom before, Carlisa Finley.
Oh, thank
for
you so much.
dedicating your valuable time and for leading this conversation. I want to
Thank you
thank
for
our,
honesty.
thank you. I also want to thank our fiscal partner, the Community Foundation of Anne Arundel County, and our amazing production team for this Zoom and others, Civility Management Services, who's so generous to us in their support. You see on your screen our list of leadership sponsors and advocate sponsors: Anne Arundel Dermatology, Sims and Campbell Estate and Trust, Merrill Lynch, Murray, McGarren and Shirey, Sarah Greenlee Morse, Chesapeake Medical Imaging, Guard Your Smile Dentistry, and Whimsy Cove Framing and Fine Art. Be well, be safe, and join us at our upcoming events, all listed on the landing page of givingtogether.org. Thank you so much.